Now, our next witness wishes to be known as Huw, does he?
He does.
In his case, there is a form of anonymity which is a little different from the orders which I've made in the past. And this is because there is no restriction on his name, but he has requested that his image should not be broadcast. So though you will see him here, and anyone out there will hear him, his image is not to be revealed. The order I make thus reads like this: any video recording or other photographic image of Huw Thomas cannot be broadcast, disclosed, or published in any form unless express permission is given by me or by the solicitor to the inquiry acting on my behalf. Now, it follows, of course, that if you are taking photographs in and around this building, and I can well understand why you might, please make sure that he is not caught inadvertently in those photographs. With that introduction, can we have Huw Thomas, please?
Please state your full name.
Huw Michael Thomas.
Take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God
That the evidence I shall give.
that the evidence I shall give
Shall be the truth.
shall be the truth,
The whole truth.
the whole truth,
And nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Huw, when you were just 4 years old, you required a skin graft.
Yes.
Can you tell us what happened?
As a child, I ran out into the road and a lorry knocked me down.
And what difficulties did that skin graft cause you over the years?
Well, because the skin grafting in those days was in its infancy, the skin graft, instead of growing with my leg, it stretched. So if I banged my leg on something, it would just split. And then it would take many months to heal.
And in 1976, when you were in your early 30s, the skin graft started to fail.
Yes.
So what happened then?
I went to St. Lawrence Hospital, where I had a new graft in its place. But unfortunately, the skin graft was put in the wrong place. And when I told the surgeon, he got rather annoyed, shouted at me, and walked off and never spoke to me again.
After the operation to redo the skin graft, you received 2 bags of blood.
Yes.
What's your understanding of why it was given to you?
It was very hot in '76, and I believe it was in June. And I was told at the time that the transfusions were purely to help the graft heal and take properly.
And when you were given the blood, were you warned about any risks involved in having it?
No.
You believe that's how you came to be infected with hepatitis C. Why is that?
Well, up until then, I was perfectly okay, and I was perfectly okay for 10 years after. Didn't know that I had anything wrong with me. In about 86, 87, I started having symptoms of tiredness, headaches, flu-like symptoms. And they lasted for quite a while. So I went to the doctor, and they thought initially I was allergic to something. And the doctor tested me for I don't know, probably over about 3 months. And he couldn't find anything wrong. And I thought that after such a long period of time, I needed a second opinion. So I went to another doctor. And they checked me for diabetes. And that came back negative, except on the last test, there was doubt. And so rather than just ignore it, they gave me glycoside tablets. But I didn't feel that they were doing me any good, and I was still feeling ill. So I stopped taking the glycoside tablets, and the new doctor who I saw, he suggested I go down and get a liver function test. And when I had the liver function test, it came back that I had a problem with my liver.
You were seen in the hospital in about 1988, 87, 88, you think?
Yes.
And they did a standard hepatitis screen, which showed you didn't have hepatitis A or hepatitis B. Mm-hmm. And the doctor asked you about your drinking. What can you tell us about that?
Well, he said, he didn't actually say that my liver function problem was due to alcohol, because I wasn't drinking that much. And he said it might be the cause. And it was some time after that I was told, as far as I can recollect, that I had hepatitis C.
Let's just take it in stages for a moment. There were the discussions about the drinking, and you were questioned about
Yes.
how much you drank. And then you went for a biopsy of your liver. And if we can have document 0023003, we can see that on the form, the examination notes that you had a blood transfusion when you were young. So it was noted there that you had the blood transfusion. And then if we have document 0023004, please, Paul. November 1988, it's recorded this chap's recent liver biopsies confirmed cirrhosis, probably based on alcohol. The disease didn't look very active, and this would be in keeping with the fact that he stopped drinking. And there's a note that you will remain, the doctor hopes you'll remain abstinent. You recall a further test in 88 or 89. You're not entirely sure if it was 1988 or 89. What was that test that you recall?
As I recall, there was a doctor in Belgium had devised some sort of test, because before that I was told I had it was possibly hepatitis non-A and B, but they didn't know what it was. And then in 88, I believe it was, 89, a Belgian doctor had devised a test, and it was, as to my recollection, that's when I was told after the test that I had hepatitis C.
In your records, there's no note of that test in 88 or 89. There's a letter in 1994. If we can have document 0023002, please. And it records in August 1994, I reviewed this man today and was interested to find that his hepatitis C serology is positive. This explains the disproportionate elevation of the AST over the time I've been seeing him. Thus, his cirrhosis is caused by hepatitis C, and alcohol has at the most been a minor additive problem. One cannot be quite certain when he acquired the hepatitis C, but it was probably at the time of multiple blood transfusions in 1947. In terms of management, I don't think this diagnosis really makes any difference. That letter appears to suggest that your first hepatitis C positive test was in 1994, but your firm belief is that there was some form of test done in 1988 or 1989.
Yes.
So further investigation is obviously going to be undertaken in relation to that possible test in 88, 89, and it's our understanding that the doctor who was treating Huw at the time is still alive, so that contact with him can be made. When you were first told about the positive hepatitis C, do you recall what you were told, and particularly about prognosis?
Yes, I can remember Dr. Kingham telling me that I had hepatitis C, and he said there was no cure for it. And when I asked him the prognosis, he said, well, you're either going to die or you'll have to have a transplant, a liver transplant. And he kept me under his control until 2000, when he referred me, until 1999, when he referred me to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Birmingham.
And when you were first told the diagnosis, how did you feel?
Well, initially being told hepatitis C, it didn't mean much to me. But when he said that there's a good possibility of death, or I'll have to have a transplant, it was a kick in the teeth. And I was just shocked. I didn't know what to think.
You've described in your statement that when you left, everything seemed different for a period.
Oh yes. I suppose it was due to the shock. But when I left his office and went home, everything was so much brighter. The trees were greener, flowers were brighter, the sun was very bright. And I went to a friend of mine to tell him what I'd been told. And looking back, I was just in shock. It just stunned me.
In your statement, you've said that you were then anxious on a day-to-day basis about what was happening.
Well, yes, because I had this prognosis and the knowledge that I was basically living with death because there was no cure for it. So I was constantly worried about my family as much as anything.
And that fear wasn't helped by an event at the rugby club at some point.
Oh, no.
Can you tell us what happened?
I went down to the rugby club and I was talking to some friends, standing up, having a pint, and one of the members of the club came up to me. He's an undertaker, and he was looking me up and down. He said, oh, 5'7", 30 stone. He said, give me a card. When you need me, let me know. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're not looking well. Words to that effect. And what he meant was I wasn't long for this earth.
You had your first round of treatment for the hepatitis C.
Mm-hmm.
We think in about 1997. The dates are a little bit unclear, but we think it's about 1997. Can you tell us what that involved?
That was an injection I gave myself daily, interferon and riboflavin. And I had that for 3 months. And, well, it just didn't do any good. So it was stopped.
It didn't clear the virus.
No.
But you also had quite serious side effects from it.
Yes. It had, to me, it had mainly an emotional effect, if anything. Although there were some aches and pains and headaches and what have you. But that was something I put up with in order to get rid of the virus.
And what were the emotional side effects?
It just made me irritable. And I'm generally a happy kind of person. And I was miserable, absolutely.
As you say, the treatment was unsuccessful, and then 1999, large growths were found in your liver.
Yes.
So what happened then?
Dr. Kingham had already referred me to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but the intention was, after tests I had in the Queen Elizabeth, was to cut the growths out of my liver. That was to be done on the 31st of December, 99. And then suddenly, for some reason, after a few days, a week, they decided to give me a liver transplant. And they put me on top of the priority list. Then I was called back to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to see the coordinators and a psychiatrist and to be told exactly what would happen with the transplant. And we went home that afternoon and went to bed in the evening, and about 12:30, the beeper went off. And I phoned them and they said, come in immediately, you've got a liver.
The day you'd been given the buzzer to take home and wait,
Yeah.
it went off.
Yes.
You weren't receiving a full liver, you were just receiving...
The liver is in two lobes, a large one and a smaller one. I had the large, and a 4-year-old boy had the smaller one.
The buzzer went off and you went in to have your transplant.
Yes.
But it wasn't entirely straightforward.
No,
it
it wasn't.
Can you tell us about that?
They told me that I would probably be in about 2 weeks, and I could go home. And for the first 6 days after the transplant, everything was fine. The doctors were saying, you're making remarkable progress. You'll be able to go home 7, 8 days. And I thought, oh, great. But sometime during the 6th day, my body went into rejection. I went into a coma. And, well, I was like that until later on in the evening.
You were in the coma for a day.
Yeah.
And when you came round, you were very upset.
Yes. Didn't know what had happened to me. And then they came around and said, you've had something gone wrong. We think it may be rejection, but you seem to be okay now. You're coming around from it. And that basically was it. And as time went by, I got better up to a point, but all my blood readings were wrong. I wasn't eating. I went home. They sent me home in an ambulance. And I was home 2 days, 3 days, and I vomited blood, which of course frightened me. And I phoned the hospital up, and they said they were sending down an emergency ambulance for me. So the ambulance came and took me straight up to the QEH again. And I was there about a week or so, and they said I could go home again. So I went home, and all things were going wrong. And they got another ambulance from Singleton that took me back up to the QEH. And they said, from now on, you're staying here until we are satisfied you're okay. I stayed there for 2 months. At the end of 2 months, the doctor, one of the surgeons came up. He's already been mentioned earlier on. He said, we don't know what the devil's wrong, but your liver isn't working properly, and we've given you all the medication that's available. and he said, you better start getting your house in order. Because he said I was going to die. So I remained very ill and weak in hospital, and then one day, after 3 months, the doctors were at the bottom of my bed, saying, one of them said, why do we let him go home for a long weekend? And I thought, oh, if they are thinking of that, I'm going and I'm not coming back. And I insisted on leaving. A friend of mine came up from Swansea and took me home.
And by then you were being tube fed.
I'd been tube fed for, I don't know, 4-6 weeks.
You got home.
And I got home with these tubes in me. Our next door neighbour came in and ran out crying. I was in a terrible state. My family came down. This was on the weekend. Come the Monday, I was really low. And on the Tuesday, I thought, I've had enough of this. I can't stand this any longer. So I pulled the tubes out. And my wife said, why don't I make you some little morsels, hors d'oeuvres, little tasty bits. So I tried one, I remember trying one. And after about an hour, I thought, oh, I feel like something else. And so she started making me, as I say, these little hors d'oeuvres, tasty bits. I ate a few of those per day for about 3 days. And I carried on eating little morsels, and then my bowels started to work, and I had horrendous pain. On the 4th or 5th day, I was double up on the floor, and then things settled down, and then she carried on making me small amounts of food. And really, from that moment on, I started to feel better. But when I was in hospital, I was telling them all the time, I can't eat. In a month, I had half an egg and half a bowl of cornflakes. I told the doctor at least 6 or 7 times, but nothing seemed to happen. And I should have been seeing a dietitian after the operation. But she never turned up. So after 2 months, one of the doctors asked me, this was when I was still feeling very bad. One of the doctors asked me, he said, where's the dietitian? And I said, I haven't seen a dietitian. And he said, oh. So he went around and got the dietitian. She came, and she gave me a chitty, a little voucher, to go down to the restaurant and eat something. Well, I did eat something, but it didn't stay down. It came back up again.
Once you'd been at home for a little while and starting to eat small things that your wife had prepared,
yes,
you then had the news that the liver had started working.
No. No. The liver, my liver didn't start working for 10 months. And during that time, I had to go to Birmingham Hospital twice a week. That was the only condition that they would allow me to go home. So I was going up twice a week, having all the blood tests. And after 10 months, I saw one of the doctors up there, a Dr. Mutimer, and he said, I don't know what happened, but he said, your liver suddenly started working. And from that moment on, I've gone from strength to strength.
In 2002, there were some concerns about the new liver.
Yeah.
And that the hepatitis C was starting to cause damage to the new liver.
Mm-hmm.
You were advised to start... You were advised to start pegylated interferon.
Yep.
What did you think about that?
I was asked if I wanted to go on, as far as I remember, there were 13 of us, all guinea pigs. And they asked us if we wanted to go on to this pegylated interferon. Well, as far as I was concerned, yes, I wanted to get rid of this virus. So a German doctor came around, explained the process of this pegylated interferon, and he asked me whether I wanted a small amount of this interferon, a large amount, a bigger amount, or a very large amount. And I said, well, give me the large, I want to get rid of it. So I had a large amount of interferon. That happened, I had to keep taking that for 12 months. But it was absolutely horrendous. My wife almost divorced me, literally. It made me nasty. I just wasn't fun to be around. I wasn't nice to anyone. I was getting headaches and aches and pains and feeling really low. But I was determined to see it through for the 12 months. And as far as I remember, there were 9 people who were on this course. 9 of them dropped out pretty quickly because of the after effects, the side effects. 2 others dropped out later, and I believe there were 2 of us left back in, and I think that the 2 of us saw it through to the end.
And the treatment cleared the virus?
It cleared the virus in 2003. I think it was 2003. I was declared clear, but they said not officially. We'll have to wait until 2005 after a series of tests to say that you are finally cleared of it.
And what's your health like now?
Oh, touch wood, perfect.
You've had the transplanted liver for 19 years.
Yes.
And what's your major worry now?
Well, when I had the transplant, they said that they expected the liver to last 10, maybe 12 years. And, well, it's lasted now nearly 20 years. 20 years in January. And I'm living with the sword of Damocles above me, because it could go wrong at any time, as far as I'm aware.
In your statement, you've said you live in constant fear that your liver might be rejected and you don't know how long it will last. The only option, should your liver fail, would be to have another transplant.
Yes.
Given my current circumstance, I believe the chances of another liver are slim. I therefore feel like I have the sword of Damocles hanging over me.
Oh, yes. I think that people who are in my position, who have been contaminated with this blood, I believe that all of them should get preferential medical treatment, because it's an ongoing thing. It's something, especially with hepatitis C, but even with HIV. People have constant problems, and I think that they have special circumstances and they should get preferential medical treatment.
After the transplant, you tried to return to work. What were you doing, and were you able to go back?
No, I wasn't able to go back to work because when employers found out that I still had hepatitis C, they wouldn't entertain me.
And you'd previously worked abroad
Yes.
in mechanical engineering,
Yeah.
but you were advised that going abroad wasn't a wise option for you.
No, one of the hepatitis C specialists at the time, Dr. Mutimer, I asked him, could I carry on travelling abroad, working? And he said I would advise against it, so I stopped.
And what impact did that have on you financially?
Well, my mortgage wasn't being paid, my children went without, my wife did. Our whole quality of life, well, it just disappeared. And in the end, I had to sell my house because we were in debt. Couldn't afford our mortgage at the time. And, well, I had to sell it, and a house, well, it wasn't a house, it was a home. And we had to sell that, take the equity out of it, and buy, as some people have been there, it was a hovel when we went there. There was no bathroom, there was no kitchen. The whole house needed complete renovation. I couldn't afford to pay anybody, so I had to do it myself, while still recovering from this transplant. But we did it over the years, and things are now quite good.
You were told by a family member about financial assistance schemes in about 2004. What did you do about it when you heard about the schemes?
Well, I hadn't heard of any financial help at all from anyone. But an aunt of mine phoned me up and she said that there is some sort of financial help. She gave me the telephone number and I phoned up and the lady I spoke to at the time, I explained that what I'd gone through, and I had hepatitis C, and she said, when did you have it? Well, I said, the doctor believes I had it in 1976 on a blood transfusion I had. Oh, and she said, there's nothing we can do for you because before 1988, I think it was, or 89, hepatitis C wasn't known about, so you can't claim. And I thought, oh, but there we are.
You phoned again
Yes,
and tried again, applied through the application forms,
yeah.
and were you successful?
Yes, they put me in touch with the Skipton Fund, and they were great. They asked for my doctor and everything, if my memory serves me rightly. They got in touch with the doctor on my medical records, and then they took me on. And I think it was around about that time, 2004, 2005, because I had gone into this, I received money off the Skipton Fund, a lump sum, and a monthly income.
But until your aunt told you about the financial assistance schemes, you hadn't heard about them and were entirely unaware of them.
I knew nothing at all about anything like that.
Throughout all of this time, you've told very few people about your hepatitis C. Why is that?
Well, initially, when I mentioned hepatitis C, especially if it was in the earshot of other people, I can remember once in, I think it was the surgery or maybe in the hospital, I was asked what was wrong, and I said, I believe I got hepatitis C. And they said, oh, okay, go and sit down and you'll be able to see the doctor. And when I went to sit down. There were 2 women there, and they moved away. And I thought, oh, the unclean. That's what I basically thought. Obviously, people are scared of hepatitis C because it was becoming known. And every time I went somewhere, you'd get a look if I mentioned hepatitis C. And I was always mentioning hepatitis C because if I went to see a nurse and they had to take bloods or anything, I used to tell them because I didn't want them getting anything. And then the nurse that I used to see in the surgery, she always used to put her gloves on, which was the right thing to do. But I think only because I told her at the time.
You found it difficult telling other medical professions because of their reaction to
Yes,
it.
yeah.
Can you describe what their reaction was?
If I was in a reception area and I told somebody I mentioned hepatitis C, you could see that on some of the receptionist faces that a look of disgust, as if, I think probably because hepatitis C was becoming known because of drug use. And I've never taken drugs of any form in my life, except for medication. And it just made you feel embarrassed and it made you feel dirty.
You've described a moment ago that you think that those who have been infected through infected blood should be given priority in the medical care. You've said a little bit more about that in your statement. What else would you like to say about that?
Well, I think that all of the people who've been infected with this blood, we should all be given identification cards, so when we go to hospitals for something, give them the card and then they know that you are a priority case. The reason I say that is that hepatitis C doesn't just bring about damage to the liver. There are other health implications as well.
Those are the questions I have for you, Huw. Is there anything else you would like to say?
Yes, I think the financial assistance that we've been given, considering what we've lost, I've lost hundreds of thousands of pounds. Considering what we lost, the financial compensation isn't anywhere near enough. As David Cameron said, it should be meaningful and worthwhile. And it should be related to the way that we've suffered, and we are all suffering. So I think that the government should give us parity with all the English victims of this, because they get paid a hell of a sight more than us. And that is not fair. We've all gone through the same thing.
So those are my questions to you.
Thank you. Well, could I thank you very much, Huw, for your individual and compelling account of what happened to you, and for your thoughts about the various recommendations which you've made as you've gone through your tale. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
We'll take a break till 20 to 3. 20 to 3.